Hello, BookTube. It's Wednesday, a super humid, dark, cloudy, rainy Wednesday, but I didn't bother even to worry about the light here at Hyde Cottage because, as I mentioned earlier today, lately the holy nimbus, which you can see illuminating this half of my face, follows me wherever I go, day or night. I could film a BookTube video in the middle of the night with no lights on, and I would be well illuminated by the holy nimbus. But I went out today. I went out and about. There's been a bit of a gap between my last videos and this one. And one of the things I did was go to the comic shop. Wednesday is New Comic Book Day. And I hadn't been in a while because nothing, I look at the listings online and nothing had appealed to me. Not enough to make a trip. Today, my only worry was that the small detour to go to the shop would actually get me caught in the rain. But miraculously, neither I nor Frida have been caught in the rain today. And I did get some issues, although once again, my visit to the comic shop was characterized as much by what I didn't get as by what I did get. One of the things I wanted, for instance, was a $40 graphic novel that I would gladly have bought if they'd had it. The new Marvel Epic collection is a Conan the Barbarian collection of issues from his when he was being published by Dark Horse, I believe. So I've never seen these issues before. And a couple of them are drawn by artists that I really like. I would gladly have paid for that, but it wasn't there. And there was one other thing that wasn't there. I'll get to that at the end of this video. But first, let's look at the ones at the comics that I did get. I got 3 issues, 3 floppy issues. No collections of any kind. I would have bought that Conan thing, and there was also a new hardcover reprint of Crisis on Infinite Earths. The big Megapalooza DC continuity reboot from what must be 30 years ago. I know every issue. I know every good moment, every boring moment, every dumb moment of Crisis on Infinite Earths, and I've had it many times. I bought the issues as they were coming out. I bought the first collection. I bought the second collection. DC regularly reprints the thing because it's so iconic. And this is a $50 hardcover. That's not bad as a price for remastered artwork and whatnot. So I was tempted, but I didn't do it. I might get that next week if next week is a light week. Instead, I just got 3 floppy comics, the actual weekly comics that come out. There were Marvel Comics True Believer issues. I couldn't help but notice there were a couple of those. There were X-Men True Believer issues. Marvel has recently started reprinting old back catalog stuff for $1 a piece. And Marvel has also started to sort of shamefacedly admit that even factoring in the impulse buy factor of having these things be $1 a piece, a lot of those reprint issues are outselling the current issues of Marvel's comics. And there's a horrible reality behind that Marvel either has to face or go out of business, which is that something is appealing to fans about those earlier issues that isn't appealing to them about current issues. And it's not hard to pinpoint what those things are. It's not hard at all. If Marvel wanted to, I mean, these aren't dumb people. If they wanted to, they could recapture the people who are buying those issues tomorrow, or not tomorrow, because these things have a long lead time, but in 2020. They could do that fairly easily if they wanted to. It's clear that they don't want to. It's clear that they have some sort of corporate policy, some sort of corporate philosophy that they are going to pursue, whether it loses the money or not. And the fact that it's a philosophical thing rather than a sign of the times is shown distinctly by these True Believer $1 comics, which sell out. But anyway, I saw some of those, but I mainly stuck to main issues, to new issues. Although the first issue that I want to show you is not new. This is technically a reprint series. We've seen it before. I love it. I have been absolutely loving it. This is Superman Up in the Sky. And these adventures were part of larger square-bound collections that went out to Walmart last year. And they weren't available in comic shops. I'm not anywhere near a Walmart. I would never go anyway. So Walmart is for people with cars. I don't have a car. So I thought I was just going to miss these issues. And I had no idea how good they were. This is written by Tom King and drawn by Andy Kubert. And this particular issue features one of the stories features a race between Superman and the Flash. As you can see, this would have made a much better cover for the issue. than fat Superman having a heart attack, and also not making any sense at all. I mean, why are they still running full tilt if they've just crossed the finish line? One way or another, I have been pleased by this miniseries. This is, I think, only what is this? I think there's only going to be 6 of these. I don't quite remember, but it's not an ongoing thing. I wasn't pleased by this issue. One half of the issue was the standard story, Superman races the Flash. That has been a tried and true thing. I have the first issue where DC Comics decided to do that, with a great Carmine Infantino cover that has become iconic. And with Curt Swan artwork on the inside, which is kind of ironic because Curt Swan was the iconic artist for Superman for forever and ever. But one thing he does not do well is motion, let alone speed. So it was kind of funny to see him draw that issue. But it's become a staple, sort of the Marvel Comics version of who would win in a fight between Thor and the Hulk. And at least inside comic continuity, both of those questions, who's faster, the Superman or the Flash, and who would win in a fight between Thor and the Hulk, at least in current comic continuity, both of those questions have easy answers. And that's not the case. In the comics world, among comics fandom, they can't have easy answers. In Marvel Comics, of course, Thor would win. He's a mortal god of thunder. The Hulk is a strength-oriented rage monster. Thor has fought many, many, many of those over time. It wouldn't be hard at all to just win. And the same thing is true with Superman versus the Flash. The Flash, in current comics continuity, isn't just fast. He accesses something called the Speed Force, which allows him basically to teleport, basically to defy any kind of physics, even on the quantum level. And Superman can't do that. So in current continuity, Flash would win, of course, in a race between the two of them. But instead, this is sort of a takeoff on that first issue, that first time that they raced 70 years ago, where there were rules and whatnot, and they both had to follow them. And I hate to say it, but this issue, I did not like at all. There are two distinct storylines. The first one is Superman versus the Flash, and I might have liked it for Andy Kubert's gorgeous artwork, but oh my god, I've heard all sorts of stuff about this Tom King person, but I've hardly ever read him. My god, I've never read a writer since Chris Claremont, who writes so much. I mean, look at this. Look at that page. The writing just goes on forever and ever. You've got this beautiful artwork. That page needs probably one caption. Instead, look at this. It's just a novel. And the second story in this wasn't much better. Some sort of cosmic radiation separates Superman into two halves. One is the thoroughly human Clark Kent. The other is the thoroughly alien, the thoroughly Kryptonian Superman. And they have sort of a dialogue. And I've never really liked that at all. It doesn't really work as a characterization of Superman at all. So this issue was kind of a dud. And if you're seeing Superman up in the sky, then if you've been watching these Comics Wednesday videos, you'll know the other comic that I got, and it was not a dud. To put it mildly, I am loving this series. This is also a mini-series. This is by Greg Rucka and an artist named, I think, Tom Perkins. Let me get that right so I don't... Mike Perkins. And it's Lois Lane. It's a miniseries featuring Lois Lane, who I used to read when she had her own comic book, back when it was called Lois Lane, Superman's Girlfriend. And I didn't particularly like those issues. I thought they were fun. They were nice, light fun. All DC Comics at the time was nice, light fun. But this is just terrific. Just a terrific story. I've talked about it before on these Wednesday comics, and it's just unfolding. There are three main plot lines, one involving a murdered reporter that Lois Lane is investigating, one involving a sort of a minor scandal that's arisen because social media has photographed her kissing Superman when the world has no idea that Superman is Clark Kent. And this issue introduces a new little plot wrinkle. It won't last more than an issue. We saw it. It was the cliffhanger of the last issue where Lois Lane comes home after a hard day of reporting and hears the shower on and assumes that it's her husband in the shower. And she opens the door and it's her teenage son. And then he is mortified, and so is she. And this issue picks up right off where that left off, where in this continuity, uh, Lois Lane and Clark Kent had a son, and for a long time he was a boy. He was a little boy, and that was written really well. They were, as a family unit, that was written really well. They were the parents of a little boy, maybe 8 years old, maybe a little younger than that. And then there were all sorts of cosmic hijinks, a storyline that I would prefer to think didn't happen at all. I'm kind of waiting for DC Comics to retroactively wipe it out of continuity, in which Superman's father, Jor-El, survives the destruction of Krypton. And then, as if that weren't bad enough, decides to take Lois Lane and their boy son, John Kent, on space adventures with him, without his son's permission, without Superman's permission. Superman is just left alone on Earth. A totally dumb storyline, and its origin couldn't be clearer. It was clear that some, in today, gone tomorrow, cokehead writer thought, hey, I remember the cool old days when Superman didn't have any dependents, when he didn't have any family. I want those back. Make it happen and give me, a gold-plated helicopter or I'm gone. One way or another, that stupid storyline is still clinging around Superman's stuff. And when Lois Lane and Jonathan Kent, young John Kent, came back from space with Jor-El, John Kent was suddenly a teenager. Because you can't have a boy in DC Comics. You got to have a teenager. And I was skeptical about it, but I have to say, the dynamic written in here, the dynamic that Greg Rucka writes here between Lois Lane, the mother, and her teenage son, is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. This issue is mostly people sitting around talking, and yet I didn't mind. I ordinarily would mind something like that, but it's so well done. There's another wrinkle in the storyline here. Lois Lane has been employing Renee Montoya, who has the vigilante name of The Question. And she is a legacy character. She got her super identity as The Question from the previous owner, who apparently died in the New 52 miniseries. In a wonderful scene. There's a wonderful scene where he dies, and he appears to be back from the dead. And so half the story, when we're not seeing Lois Lane sitting and talking with her teenage son, we're seeing the two Questions sitting and talking with each other. And the writing is so crisp that I didn't mind at all. And in this issue, John Kent tells his mother something that is going to be important for the rest of this video. He tells his mother that he has been contacted by teenagers from 1,000 years in the future who want him to go forward into the future and join their super team. And he's asking his mother if she's okay with that. and she is. I mean, she has a wonderful moment here, a wonderful thing where other parents send their kids to college. I'm sending you to join a super team in the far future. But they also just stand there by the river and talk. I want to read you a bit of the exchange here. I won't read you the whole thing. It's all this hyper-realistic artwork by Mike Perkins. John Kent says, Pa says someone tried to kill you last night. Lois says, oh, did he? And the son says, yeah. And Lois says, your father, for all his awesome power, doesn't actually know that. They may not have been after me. I might have just been in the right place at the wrong time. And John Kent says, you're going to be okay. And Lois Lane says something that I have been waiting. I didn't realize. I've been waiting about 70 years to see this character say this. She says, sweetheart, I was making people angry enough to kill me long before I ever met your father. Didn't stop me then, won't stop me now. I would read an ongoing monthly comic starring that Lois Lane. Absolutely. So I really enjoyed this. I really did. This series has not let me down. This is a perfect example where not only am I enjoying the weekly or the monthly adventure of having a comic book that I can look forward to and that has genuine twists and turns and human characters that I can relate to, but also I might buy the trade paperback of this. I might. It's a lot less of a pain in the neck than fishing through my individual issues, especially since I've cut back on a lot of the buying that I do. But the third thing that I bought, you would think, would have me in squeals to seventh heaven. But on the one hand, it isn't. Well, all right. Let's back up. I had my problems with it. Let's just put it that way. A little while ago, I showed you the first issue of a two-parter called Legion of Superheroes Millennium, in which the writer Brian Michael Bendis, who is another of these fly-by-night so-called geniuses, has been given a blank check to rewrite the Legion of Superheroes, which is the super team from the 1,000 Years in the Future that John Kent was talking to Lois Lane about in Lois Lane. He's been given a free reign to just rewrite the Legion, to reboot it in any way that he pleases, and he is going to do that. The Legion, the Brian Michael Bendis Legion of Superheroes, he'll stick around for maybe 5 issues, maybe 6, and then he'll be gone. And any mess that he makes will just be left in the lap of whoever follows, although probably nobody will. Probably DC tends to have terrible business instincts, so they probably won't plan or even anticipate as adults, just sitting in a room, that sales will drop when the star leaves. They probably won't. They're probably not grounding the issue at all. So probably it will limp along for a little while after Brian Michael Bendis leaves in 5 issues, despite the fact that he's saying, I've lived all my life to do this. That won't matter. Somebody will dangle a larger pile of coke or a bigger check in front of him, and suddenly a year from now, he'll be saying, I've waited all my life to write Adam Strange or Millie the Model. These fly-by-night hired superstars always say crap like this, and they don't stick around. They don't have the ability to tell stories like this in the long term. So who knows what the mess will be a year from now. But the second issue of Legion of Superheroes Millennium came out today. And the first issue followed a minor Superman villain called Rose and Thorn. One woman who has a split personality, and when the Thorn personality takes over, Thorn is superpowered. Minorly superpowered. She's never any threat to Superman or anything. But it turns out Brian Michael Bendis writes her in the first issue of Millennium that one of the unexpected side effects of her superpower is that she's immortal. She never ages. So we follow her as she lives through DC's future continuity, which is spotty. It's kind of spotty. It's kind of dystopian until you get to the Legion of Superheroes. Between then, you have the Earth falling to pieces. You have Kamandi, the last boy on Earth. You have OMAC, the one-man army. You have the Space Cabbie and a whole bunch of other stuff that just doesn't fit in and that doesn't look particularly appealing as a time to live. Thorn lives through all of that. She is living straight through all of that time. And in these issues, she's very cynical. Her immortality is making her very cynical because she's seeing all of these epics in DC's future in which there are no heroes. And it starts to make her very bitter towards the very idea of heroes. She starts to think the future wouldn't be this bleak if they had been telling the truth about all the stuff that they used to champion. And that first issue was really neat. I really liked it, mainly because it didn't have the Legion in it. It was mainly just this great story. The second issue, Thorn is still traveling through DC's future, but she is getting closer and closer to the 31st century and to the time of the Legion of Superheroes. And this is the other example of something that I went in wanting, but not getting, because this was the only cover left on the newsstands. A boring Brian Hitch, everybody flying towards the sky cover. He has done a variation on this probably 1,000 times. He can do it in his sleep. And if you squint really hard past OMAC and past Booster Gold, if you squint really hard, you might be able to make out the Legion of Superheroes somewhere on this cover. Needless to say, this was not the cover that I wanted. This one was. That is beautiful. That is John Kent reaching for his Legion flight ring, while the rest of the Legion cheers. That is a beautiful cover. I asked my guy at the shop if he had any of the good cover left. He did not, but he thinks that he might be able to get me one for next week, so hoping, fingers crossed. He's also thinking maybe he might be able to get me that Conan Epic collection for next week, because he understands customer service. And I like that. I think he's the only one left in Boston in any kind of work that does. Now that Deb and I are no longer at the bookstore, I don't think there's anyone else who does. He doesn't slouch. He doesn't mumble. He's not begrudging. He's cheerful. He's happy. He likes what he does. And he's willing to do all the things for customer service that Deb and I used to do just on instinct. You know who's a good customer, and you give them little things here and there. You make the extra effort because you want their business. Anyway, this issue was also largely wonderful because it's largely Thorn making her way through all kinds of future epics. Like, for instance, look at this gorgeous page where we get Oliver Coipel drawing OMAC. Isn't that incredible? Look at the detail. Just amazing. And Omak encounters Thorn, and she tells him, listen to the words of an old lady who has seen some stuff. This world is madness, and you can't just throw trucks at it. You need to get your stuff together and make this world an actual better place. Because I looked around, and there ain't no Superman coming this time. The heroes are so long gone that no one even talks about them anymore. It's just us, so do something. And that is partially a reflection of her cynicism. The heroes are gone. The heroes are long gone. That's the interesting thing about DC's future continuity, is that there is a 1,000-year stretch where there are no superheroes, where it's just one dystopia after another. But eventually, after all these fantastically drawn, there are a whole bunch of guest artists. After all these fantastically drawn moments, she ends up at Legion headquarters. And for the first time, we see, in a comic book instead of in an advertisement, for the first time, we see the Legion of Superheroes. They are taking a picture. This is actually believe it or not, a callback to a classic Legion moment where the Legion poses for a picture on the cover of an issue. And this person, who is clearly Timberwolf, asks her, can we help you? And she tells him in this last panel, I have come from the past and I have serious stuff to talk to you about. But this is our first look at the Legion. And you can see some of the templates. I can see some of the templates that I recognize quite well. There's a character who's very fat. That is Bouncing Boy. There's a character who is 3 different identical versions of herself. That is Triplicate Lass. There's clearly Chameleon Boy. There's Superboy. That is John Kent, the son of Superman. There's Brainiac 5. This costume belongs to Ultra Boy. And so on and so forth. There's a character in armor with no physical body is Wildfire. That is clearly some version of Dawnstar, although there are no wings. There's a gigantic boy. That's Colossal Boy. There's a stone person, and so on and so forth. There's Mon-El, clearly identifiable. There's Shadow Lass, clearly identifiable. But there are lots of changes, too. These are only templates. Most of it looks significantly different in some ways. For instance, you see Saturn Girl, but Cosmic Boy has a shaved sides of the head and appears to be Oriental, and Lightning Lad is black, and that is Brian Michael Bendis. That is, and he says in interviews, this is the most diverse team that any Legion has ever been, and won't that be great? And there's no way that you can argue with that. Just a glance at that team roster tells me that this is not the team that I spent 50 years reading and loving. I'll just have to see if I can love this team. But I can hear already. I mean, of course I object. These characters aren't yours to muck around with. You are their steward. You don't get to change them. If you want to add diversity to the Legion of Superheroes, 21st century, 2019 style diversity to the Legion, first of all, it already had that. And all you have to do is know the Legion to know that, but I guarantee you Brian Michael Bendis does not know the Legion, does not know Legion lore at all. But if you look at the diversity that the Legion has and you don't think it's enough, well then add more. But don't change the things that are already there, the things that other writers made. You didn't make them. The things that fans spent their whole lifetime reading and liking. You ought to be honored and humbled by that legacy instead of looking at it and saying, well, this is all too white. I'm going to change all this right away. And yet, I can hear already the objections from the people who will not buy this comic, but who will champion its diversity for diversity's sake alone. And what they will say is, hey, why are you getting so worked up about the skin color of a fictional character in a comic book? To which I would like to respond. I never will, because I've only been hashtagged once in my life and I don't want to be hashtagged again. But if I were crazy enough to do that, my response would be, hey, why are you getting so worked up about the skin color of a character in a comic book? Okay? Because what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. If you're saying that this is so minor a thing that I shouldn't care that it's changed, then it's so minor a thing you shouldn't care that it's changed. These characters have a 50-year history. I clearly won't get it. Now that I've seen what the Legion looks like, I clearly won't get it. And that's okay, because this might be interesting in its own right. But these characters have a history of their own, and what I wanted was for someone to bring that back. And I have a feeling that a huge majority of longtime devoted Legion fans also wanted that. And now they know they're not going to get it, so we will see. We will see whether or not this new version is interesting. But there's still a pattern here. The Legion of Superheroes has been revamped many times. Many corporate decisions have been made in boardrooms. Take this idea out and air it around. Change it up all you like. You're a superstar. That's been done a number of times, so that when there have been multiple timeline stories, fans would refer to it as the reboot Legion, the 3-boot Legion, 3 reboots in, the 5 years later Legion. The reason why Legion fans consistently name the regroup, the remake, the continuity reboot like this is going to get a remake. I guarantee you, Bendisverse or something like that. And the reason why Legion fans do that persistently is because they just reflexively refuse to say this is the Legion. Instead, the Legion, the real Legion, the one they love, is still out there. And maybe it'll make a guest appearance. But in the meantime, this is something else. This is something else. This is another reboot, another alternate Legion. And I can't help but point out, I mean, I don't mean to doom and gloom. This could be enjoyable. The first issue comes out in November. I will be here to tell you about it. But I can't help but point out that the Legion of Superheroes lasted for 60 years. Rabid fan following. Anywhere they went, they became the most popular thing in that book, often supporting more than one ongoing title at a time. And no reboot has done that. No reboot has done that. The reboots come, they stay for a while, and then they fail. And the reason why is because they're not the Legion. Because they're not giving the people who will buy the comic what the people who will buy the comic actually want. And I guess that seems to be verboten now. You just can't do that. You just can't do that. So we, instead of getting, I mean, I have bellyached on this channel from time immemorial that I thought it was a scandal that Legion is not, that DC Comics is not giving the Legion of Superheroes its own comic every month. Well, in November that changes. Something called the Legion of Superheroes with Superboy will get its own comic, and maybe I will love it. So we will see. But in the meantime, that was Comics Wednesday. It was Superman, Lois Lane, and at long last, the Legion of Superheroes. So we will reconvene next Wednesday. We'll see if there's anything I enjoyed. I mean, I liked Millennium #2 fairly well. I love the Lois Lane issue, but I kind of wanted a collection. I'm thinking now that I should have maybe walked the 10 minutes to another comic shop, see if they had the Conan volume, or maybe bought that Crisis on Infinite Earths volume, since I checked and I don't have any version of Crisis on Infinite Earths now, and I do occasionally want to go back and reread it. I'd love to show it to you. Maybe I should have done that. I didn't, because it looked like it was going to rain, so I hightailed it back to Hyde Cottage as soon as I was done. But we'll reconvene next week. We'll see. Maybe I'll buy something like that next time. We can talk about that. But I'll wrap this up for now. Only 3 issues and still went to 30 minutes. Good Lord. And mostly a Legion complaint, but that'll be the last one you'll hear. I won't repeat that. This isn't my Legion rant again. We will just watch what happens with the new comic. It comes out next month. We'll see. So I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, Book 2.